Hey. So I wanted to start a new series, and this is going to be something that was requested following a tweet that I did asking what tutorials people would like to see done with Tailwind. And one of the top ones was for me to spend some time replicating Bootstrap components in Tailwind so people could see. Now, I have been working on a website this morning and I came across a use case that is very similar to quite a common Bootstrap component, which is the button group. So I thought, while that was fresh in my mind, what I'd do is I would do a quick tutorial. So I'm not going to do anything too fancy. It's going to be in Codepen. It's going to be using the CDM version of Tailwind. Also hoping that we won't have to touch any CSS or JavaScript. So it should literally just be using the base classes. So let's do this. So we are going to effectively look at replicating, let's say these two. For the time being, these top two. Okay, so if we go into here, obviously within this, let's just add a couple of classes to HTML. Normally I do its body, but it's not accessible. So let's say the font sans stack and anti-alias, just because I'm on a Mac. Let's save that. Okay, and we're done. So the first thing that we're going to do is we will create a section, and this section will literally be the wrapper that we add our markup to. So we're going to set it to container, which is a component within Tailwind that just restricts the width of the container based on the breakpoints, and MX Auto, which is margin on the x-axis, so left to right, and we're going to set both of those values to auto. And just to demonstrate what that does, I'm just going to set a quick H1, and of course good old hello world should appear in the center of the screen. There we go. So we can see that we've now got padding on that side, padding on that side, and if we want to just show the width, we can literally set the background to red and it will be constrained. So that just gives us a bit of constraint so that we're not ending up with a massive wide form. So obviously in the real world, an import is probably going to be wrapped in a form. So let's just add a form, and then what we're going to do is we're going to add a label. Now, unlike the Bootstrap examples, what I typically do when I'm building out a form is wrap the related component in the label. And there's a couple of reasons for that, and I'll explain as I go along. But if you just add the label, and let's create a span, which will be where we put the label text. And let's say this is the button group label. Okay. And then of course what we'll do is we'll put in the input, and we're going to do the button. And what is it that Bootstrap calls it? Button. Apologies, my Mac is going a little bit slowly at the moment. In fact, yep, there we go. Asking it to possibly do a little bit too much at the moment. It's not the newest Mac. So we've got label, we've got span, we've got an input, and just one thing I have remembered, because we need to group this, we want to wrap it in a div. Okay, so we've got the div now, and as we can see, everything's there. We can see that if we wanted to type something in, it's there. It's just basic HTML. It's got very basic styling on it that's applied via the Tailwind reset class or pre-flight settings. So we can go from here now, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a bit of padding vertically just to push it off the top, just so it's a little bit easier for us to see. So we've now got button label, and that what we're going to do is we're just going to add a little bit of margin bottom. So again, it's margin bottom 2, 2 being on the 4 pixel scale being 8 pixels. And what that will do is it will just push it off the button label just so we can actually get a little bit more space. And on this containing div, we're going to set it to flex. So flex will enable us to have the elements on the same line. The button will inherit the height of the input, and we will also be able to make use of properties such as flex grow. So if we now add a class to the input and we add a class to the button, and first things first, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a background of grey light just so we can see, and I'm going to add a tiny bit of padding either side just so that we can actually see what is going on. Apologies for the pinging in the background. On that basis, we now have a background. We can see the input, we can see the label, and what I'm going to do, because it's a span and it's not obviously accepting the margin for the time being, we'll just add inline block, which is the class for display inline block, and that will just push it off. We can just see that there's that little bit of spacing just off of it now. So on the class input, let's add maybe padding for all around, and that should bring it to, on a base font size which is 16, it'll bring it to 48 pixels high. And if we just select that component, as you can see, because we've said flex, we can see that it's also inherited that height. Let's just set that to letting none so that it doesn't have any line heights. And that should now, in theory, give us, yep, 48, bang on. All right, cool. So we've now got a little bit of spacing, and you can see that we've obviously got that nicely done. So let's add a little bit of rounded, and we're going to apply rounded to the left because this is the input class that's on the left. And let's just say an input of large, just so we get quite an explicit rounding on the actual elements. And once it refreshes, you'll be able to see that. Now, if we quickly go to the button, give the computer a second to catch up. And if we don't need to apply any padding to the button because it's within a flex container, so that will apply that will match the height of the button to the container. So if we just set that to background blue, text white, that will then that. So we do, however, need to add some horizontal padding. So let's just do that, and we can see now that we've got quite a nice button. Maybe let's make that a little bit wider just so the hit area is a little bit bigger. And then what we're going to do is, as with the other one, we're going to do rounded and we're going to do large. But on this occasion, we're going to set it to rounded R rather than rounded L, which is the short code for the rounding on the top and bottom on the right-hand side, but not on the center. So you can see now we've got pretty much a very similar button here. Obviously, this is clear, this one's blue. Just because I think sometimes the button is a little bit clearer. I don't know why Bootstrap have gone with that kind of style. It doesn't particularly illustrate how it all works that clearly. So we've now got that. Let's just add background. We're going to say hover. So on hover, background blue dark, and on focus background blue dark. And what this will do is when we hover over it, you can see that it does change the color. Now I did say we were going to try and avoid CSS, but unfortunately there isn't a transform, or sorry, a transition. Is it transform? No, it's transition class within Tailwind. So what we'll do is we'll just do it really, really quick and simple. We'll just say transition, if I can type, all over 150 milliseconds, and we're going to ease out. Now, obviously, within a real component, you might want to come up with some additional ways for that to have. Maybe it's a bit faster, maybe it's got a different easing method. It's entirely up to you. However, now if we hover over this transition, helps if I actually apply the correct class, and we can now see that we have got it fading in and out when we hover over it. What is also good is if we apply this to this and we say cursor pointer, because if we click on this, it will actually provide focus to that, even though we haven't. This is the reason why we wrap everything within the label, because you can have this make it much easier for people to click into it, because the touch area is much larger. Another real benefit to this is if you apply conditional logic that checks and validates the form input, maybe through something like parser.js, you can make sure that the validation appears within the actual label. And then if somebody clicks on the validation message, so maybe it's maybe the text isn't long enough, maybe it's not the correct format, if they click on the validation message, it will actually take them to the input that is not validating correctly. Slight segue there, but if we come back here, obviously, like I said, we've got the button. All we have to do now is literally, if we apply a flex grow class to this, it will grow it across. In theory, once the computer catches up, hey presto, we have it. Now, if we wanted to have it the other way around, all we'd have to do is, if we take exactly the same markup and we just flip this around, and we take the left margin here, wait for the computer to catch up, take the right margin there, and let's maybe add a margin bottom of 6 to that, just so it pushes it off the bottom a little bit. Is that because the label is also, let's say, maybe because you might want to have it in the future where on a slightly wider screen, rather than having it run across, you want the label to appear to the left. Maybe we'll apply a flex col to this. Let's just do the same with this one. Class. We can now see that we have got a right align button, a left align button, very similar to how this is done, and with all built with almost completely native Tailwind, but also our little own created utility, which is just for transition. And that's pretty much how simple it is to replicate that form.